Education and related agencies will come together. I'm glad to be here this morning with my colleagues, some of whom are joining us from their offices or from some other location. This is the first appropriations hearing being held in person and virtually, and want to thank Chairman Shelby and his staff for letting us try this and see how this kind of information gathering works for appropriators. It's not a markup. There'll be no voting today, but we're going to get some really important information. Yesterday, the new coronavirus cases passed 50,000 for the first time, making it a single-day record. This morning, 128,000 Americans have died, and nearly 2.7 million have tested positive for COVID-V. And, of course, the thoughts of myself and everyone on this committee are with those individuals and those families who've been affected. I've called this hearing really to look at an update on the efforts that the administration's put together, and frankly, members of this committee were very involved in, to see if we couldn't establish a new way to look at responding to pandemics. I think we have the chance to actually write a new important chapter in what that response looks like. Developing the right vaccine, the right therapeutics, the right testing is important. And I think we're going to talk today about ways to try to have all of the safeguards in developing all of those things, but with a federal partner going forward more quickly than we would have ever gone forward today. I saw in reporting this morning that Pfizer is just passed an important mark with the vaccine they're working on. Maybe the most significant thing I saw in that article was that Pfizer believes they may have 100 million doses of that vaccine available by the end of the year. That would be an extraordinary thing if it happens, and I think what we're going to hear from our witnesses today is that there are other companies that would be developing different vaccines that also would add to that figure that might be available late this year or early next year. I think the administration's willingness to take this new initiative, the willingness of the administration, and frankly our Appropriations Committee and the Congress in what we did in the last COVID Act to put some money behind taking a chance, not a chance with an effective vaccine or test, but a chance that we may move forward with something that doesn't work, more to also allow us to move forward early with something that does work. This committee, the full committee, and the Congress has provided nearly $10 billion for this over. We're also going to be talking today about how manufacturing, for maybe the first time ever, would begin while the vaccine is still going through the other process, and maybe while tests are still going through the other process. As we saw earlier this year with diagnostic testing research at NIH, the current processes can be streamlined to make them faster. Just because something is new doesn't mean it's better, but this is a time to try things and to see what we can figure out to make work under the NIH's Shark Tank program that particularly Senator Alexander and I spent a lot of time talking to people at this table about, principally Dr. Collins, but people at this table, manufacturers and others. We're hoping to fast-track diagnostic tests, to have tests that are easier to take with a quicker response, that frankly millions of people can take dozens of times. Getting school started in the fall at residential campuses and elementary and secondary schools and all other campuses, having a test available will make a big difference. Some people have warned that the timetable to develop both tests and vaccines next year is far too fast. Others have said, well, maybe accelerating the process means that regulatory corners will be cut. We're going to be working really hard to be sure that is absolutely not the case, and I think our leaders here today will help reassure us of what they're doing to see that that doesn't happen. This is an opportunity for our witnesses to explain to our committee and the American people how the development process works, how they'll ensure that the vaccine will be safe, and even with an accelerated research and development timetable, how the vaccine will be distributed across the country as quickly as possible. I've said to several people lately on the topic of vaccine and distribution that obviously developing there are clearly concerns about the vaccine. About half of Americans are either reluctant. About 1 out of 5 Americans says they're just not going to take the vaccine. I certainly intend to, and I think most Americans will. And as we reassure people about this process, they'll also think about smallpox and polio and other things that in many cases vaccines have been able to move outside the system because vaccines did their job, and kids in the 4th and 5th grade don't line up any longer so that every single person takes their smallpox shot like they did when most of us were kids. I hope today's hearing really makes an impact on those concerns. I believe it will, and look forward to our witnesses. Senator Murray is here, and I'm going to recognize her for her opening statement. Senator Murray, thanks for being with us today, and thanks for working together to have this hearing.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I really want to thank you and Chairman Shelby for allowing our committee members to participate in this hearing virtually today. And I want to thank all of our committee staff for setting everything up. And I want to thank all of our witnesses who are joining us today as well. Your agencies play a critical role in the development of some of the most important tools against the COVID-19 pandemic: safe and effective diagnostics to identify the cases, therapies to help patients and frontline workers fight this disease, and ultimately a vaccine to move towards ending this crisis. That is why Congress has appropriated more than $6.5 billion to BARDA and $3 billion to NIH for work on medical countermeasures against COVID-19. And we know we'll need more funding, particularly to distribute and promote a safe, effective vaccine down the line. And we also know we're going to need to hold this administration accountable to avoid repeating mistakes and delays. The Trump administration put politics ahead of public health by promoting unproven treatments and steering PPE contracts to unqualified political allies. Face the worst of this crisis. If we want to get out of this mess anytime soon, the Trump administration has to do better, particularly when it comes to developing a safe, effective vaccine that is widely available. What I hear from experts is that while we all want a vaccine fast, a vaccine that is fast but ineffective will fall short of what is needed to turn the tide on this pandemic. That is why it is more than concerning that the Trump administration sidelined our leading scientists at CDC, removed the head of BARDA, reportedly for putting science and public health over allegiance to President Trump, and took BARDA experts off leadership of contracts related to the search for a COVID-19 vaccine. I also have concerns about why BARDA has chosen to invest solely in new vaccine technologies that have only been studied experimentally and never made it to market, while not pursuing older, proven technologies. Meanwhile, the administration still has not provided any explanation of how it is selecting vaccine candidates, what the risks are of narrowing down that shortlist, or addressed concerns about potential conflicts in contracts that predate this crisis. And it still has not provided a comprehensive national vaccine plan. We saw with testing how the administration's stubborn refusal to plan led to totally avoidable delays. So Congress clearly needs to act to hold President Trump accountable when it comes to vaccines, or risk another inadequate plan that offers too little, too late, or worse, no plan at all. That's why I am working on a proposal to require the Trump administration to provide a comprehensive plan for how it will make sure we get a vaccine that is safe and effective, produced at scale and distributed nationwide, and free and available to everyone in a way that addresses the health disparities this pandemic has made worse. This plan has to ensure that research and development is rigorous, science-driven, and inclusive, and it must lay out specific standards, more. Making all of that happen requires planning to manage the supply chain and navigate challenges like potential bottlenecks. We also need a plan for when we begin to distribute vaccines, to guide critical decisions about who gets the vaccine first, like frontline healthcare workers, high-risk groups, and tackles barriers that could otherwise limit access by making sure the vaccine is free for everyone and addressing health disparities, which have already made this crisis so much worse for communities of color. And while we need this plan as soon as possible, we also need to be clear about what scientists and clinicians have cautioned, which is that while there is no guarantee a vaccine will be ready by the end of this year, much less by this fall, there are people suffering with COVID-19 right now who need proven therapeutics to help them beat this disease. While a vaccine is our best hope for stopping this virus, it is not our only means of fighting it, nor is it a panacea on its own. So I'm alarmed that while this administration has invested heavily in vaccine development, it is treating other priorities as an afterthought by investing far less in better diagnostics that can identify infections early in the course of the illness and prevent further spread, and pulling the plug on therapeutics that could provide life-saving relief for hospitalized patients at the greatest risk of dying or suffering long-term health effects. Congress provided funding for HHS to invest in a spectrum of medical countermeasures to fight this virus, not just vaccines. We need to invest in every type of medical countermeasure and to do it in a way that benefits everyone in our country equitably, because we know right now this virus is disproportionately impacting communities of colors. For months now, I have been pressing for comprehensive demographic data on access to testing.
Of these spiky proteins on its surface. When the virus invades the human body, these spike proteins literally open the door to infection. They act as keys that fit into specific locks on the surface of cells. And once inside the cell, the virus takes over its machinery, begins replicating, producing thousands of viruses like itself, and goes on to infect other cells. This can cause severe pneumonia, blood clots, and other life-threatening complications. Now, based on hard work, we now have better means of treating COVID-19 than just a few months ago. Remdesivir and dexamethasone have proven beneficial in rigorous trials and are now standard of care for hospitalized patients. But we have much more to do. Let me say something about testing. Testing in the U.S. has come a long way. More than 30 million tests for presence of the virus have been administered in the last few months, more than in any other nation. Yet these tests, most of which rely on nasopharyngeal swabs and processing in centralized labs, are not entirely satisfactory for the needs at hand. Scaling to rapid, routine point-of-care testing would be a major advantage, but that requires new technology. With that in mind, Congress, on April 25th, provided additional resources for development of new COVID-19 tests. Just 4 days later, NIH launched the Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics, or RADX initiative. And if you turn to the next page, you'll see there a innovation funnel, which includes a Shark Tank component. This basically is an opportunity for those who've invested and invented new kinds of technologies to put their ideas forward and have them evaluated by a distinguished team of business, engineering, technology, and scale-up experts. In just 2 months, we have received more than 2,400 expressions of interest and over 560 completed applications, most of these from small businesses. Many of these proposed tests use convenient samples like saliva, which would be better than a nasal swab because you could self-collect. Of these, 23 have already made it through the Shark Tank and are undergoing intense validation in what you see here as phase 1, preparing for possible massive scale-up in phase 2, and we expect to have at least one of these technologies into phase 2 within the next week. By fall, we expect that the winning technologies will make it possible to deploy several million more tests each week. In fact, I would say maybe more than 1 million more each day. But it's not enough to diagnose the disease. We must treat it as soon as possible to prevent it. To that end, on your next page, you'll see NIH has launched the Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccines, that will be an acronym, ACTIV, A-C-T-I-V, initiative. This initiative is shown here, and the handout provides a high-level overview of the organization of this remarkable and unprecedented public-private partnership involving 18 biopharmaceutical companies, academic experts, and multiple federal agencies. In 2 short months, ACTIV has developed 5 master protocols that will accelerate research trials and hasten FDA review and possible approval. These will rigorously test a series of antivirals, anticoagulants, immunomodulators, and monoclonal antibody treatments in both inpatient and outpatient settings. Supported by Operation Warp Speed, we expect 4 treatment trials to get underway in the next 6 weeks, and we're quite excited about their potential for success. But still, the ultimate tool we need to end the COVID-19 pandemic is a vaccine. Operation Warp Speed and the ACTIV initiative are working together intensively on vaccine development. A scientific review of more than 50 candidates has already been conducted. The furthest along in U.S. testing, shown on page 5, is an experimental vaccine production of protective antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. A phase 2 clinical trial of this vaccine candidate began on May 29th, and this month we plan to launch a phase 3 clinical trial that will seek to enroll 30,000 volunteers with results expected in a few months. So clearly, we've already learned much about this devastating virus, and we've made significant strides at unprecedented speed in developing diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. Yet far more work is needed to end this global health crisis. With your support, NIH is on the case. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. Dr. Redfield.
Good morning, Chairman Blunt, Ranking Member Murray, and members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be here today with my HHS colleagues. Together, we are working on the critical issues related to COVID-19 vaccine development, manufacturing, and distribution under the auspices of Operation Warp Speed. Vaccines are one of public health's greatest scientific achievements. With the support of Congress, investments in CDC's domestic and global immunization programs continue to diminish disease threats and advance the human condition. Most importantly, vaccines save lives. Preparing for the implementation of a safe, effective COVID-19 vaccine program is a critical next step. Through our existing influenza vaccine program, CDC continues to work with state, tribal, local, territorial health partners to prepare and maintain public health distribution pipeline. This includes training personnel, building strategic relationships, utilizing data systems, identifying the resources to sustain an efficient and effective immunization infrastructure. Leveraging the existing system, CDC stands ready to support our partners with the distribution once a COVID vaccine is available. Each year, CDC safely distributes vaccine from manufacturers to nearly 40,000 public and private health providers across the nation, and in a typical year, we provide vaccine for more than 80 million individuals. During an emergency, this system has the ability to scale and the capacity to manage and distribute up to 900 million vaccine doses. This is possible because CDC has established an extensive integrated network inclusive of public health departments, health providers, and community-based groups that extend far and wide. Drawing on the lessons from 2009 H1N1 pandemic, we've identified critical considerations for rapid deployment of a new COVID vaccine. Distribution strategies will be based on many factors. One strategy likely will be prioritizing who is vaccinated. The goal is to ensure that vaccine access for all Americans who could benefit from vaccination. To do this, we must consider the logistical aspects of where vaccines are administered and who's administering. Monitoring systems will be required to document vaccination, manage inventory, and gauge vaccine supply nationwide. CDC currently manages the supply through its vaccine order system and collects vaccine coverage data from jurisdictions to help them make informed decisions. CDC's Immunization Safety Office has a long-standing history of monitoring the safety and efficacy of vaccines and will continue to provide leadership in this area. Scientifically based vaccine policies are the foundation of the U.S. immunization system. These policies are formulated by recommendations from the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice, or ACIP, and then provided to me as CDC Director. Another key component is the efficient distribution strategy to ensure that people have clear and accurate and ample information on vaccines so they can make informed decisions about getting vaccinated. Experience has shown us that vaccines are powerful tools, and reaching every individual who could benefit from immunization is an important goal. A successful vaccine program will require a combination of traditional and new innovative approaches to how to administer and deliver vaccines. Pharmacies and other complementary community locations will be more important during our response to this pandemic. And finally, public health considerations have to look at the management of the vaccine itself. Every vaccine has requirements for storage and handling that must be addressed for the vaccine to be effective when delivered. Ensuring the cold chain, the system that maintains the vaccine's integrity from when it's manufactured to when it's administered. To meet these aggressive goals, it's going to be important to enhance our nation's cold chain infrastructure. In the coming months, we will be confronted with the confluence of COVID-19 and seasonal flu. CDC is working to encourage the Americans to embrace flu vaccination with confidence. This is an important public health goal and serves two important purposes for COVID-19. First, increasing flu vaccine coverage can reduce the strain on our health system, which we've already seen in some areas from COVID-19. Second, the flu vaccine uptake is another opportunity to test our systems and infrastructure that will need to be leveraged during a COVID-19 vaccine delivery program. As we confront to fight the pandemic, it's important that all Americans have confidence in all vaccines. Through the CARES Act, CDC was provided $140 million in funding to support states and local departments for early planning of the flu-influenza season and to enhance these immunization programs across our nation. COVID-19 is the most significant public health challenge that our nation has faced in more than a century. In the absence of vaccine and countermeasures today, we are implementing effective public health measures and encouraging the adherence to what I've referred to as the powerful weapons of social distancing, face coverings, and hand hygiene. In doing so, I'm confident that we will emerge from this pandemic united together, stronger than ever. I encourage you to see the possible as both the public and private sectors pursue a vaccine and that we as a nation confront this pandemic globally. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Redfield. Dr. Dispro.
Chairman Blunt, Ranking Member Murray. Is supporting efforts to develop vaccines, treatments, and diagnostics in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. BARDA is a unique government organization created to bridge the valley of death between basic research and late-stage development of products, vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics, collectively called medical countermeasures, to address 21st century health security threats. In its brief 13-year existence, BARDA has formed over 300 industry partnerships and supported products that have received 55 FDA approvals. BARDA staff are experts in government contracting and in pharmaceutical and diagnostic development, many with over 25 years of experience working in the pharmaceutical industry. BARDA has a track record of success in delivering effective medical countermeasures in response to public health emergencies. Past examples include H1N1, Ebola, and Zika. BARDA has unique authorities allowing my organization to leverage and rapidly expand partnerships to push candidates forward to the review, testing, and approval phase. BARDA's longstanding expertise in accelerating the advanced research and development of candidate diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines is a testament to this dedicated and experienced team. I want to thank my BARDA colleagues as they work long hours and weekends to support this response. In a typical fiscal year, BARDA's highly experienced contracting professionals invest approximately $1.6 billion to support the development of MCMs to address chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats and pandemic influenza. This year, in addition, in just 3 months, we have obligated over $3.5 billion as part of the COVID-19 response. BARDA has leveraged funds provided under the CARES Act and additional funds from HHS to invest in multiple vaccine candidates, multiple therapeutic programs, and multiple diagnostics. 12 diagnostics have been granted emergency use authorization by the FDA. The BARDA COVID-19 portfolio now supports over 40 projects. When HHS Secretary Azar declared a public health emergency in January, BARDA immediately responded. ASPR BARDA established an interagency call with industry, highlighting our high-level strategy for the development of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics to address COVID-19, attracting over 1,500 participants. That same day, BARDA opened a medical countermeasure portal to accept market research submissions from stakeholders, receiving over 3,300 submissions to date. Prior to receiving supplemental funds, BARDA modified our 2 solicitations to allow for submissions of COVID-19 specific products. To date, we have received over 267 submissions under our broad agency announcement, or BAA, and 426 to our easy BAA, a streamlined solicitation with a cap of $750,000 in funding. This is what we do. We engage innovative stakeholders, establish partnerships, develop medical countermeasures, and bring them forward to the American people to save lives. Early in the COVID-19 outbreak, BARDA developed our strategy for medical countermeasure development. For vaccines, our strategy was to engage with vaccine manufacturers, developing different platform technologies, some already licensed by the FDA or nearing licensure, and who had established manufacturing processes to quickly manufacture large quantities of vaccine. Our therapeutic strategy was similar: invest in multiple technologies and to increase our chances of success. For diagnostics, our strategy was to invest in multiple technologies: molecular, antigen, and antibody-based tests. Prior to the first COVID supplemental, BARDA made initial investments in the development of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics using our existing funding and authorities. This early strategy has partially served as the basis for Operation Warp Speed Strategy, or OWS. OWS is an unprecedented collaboration between the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense to expedite development of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics and bring them to the American people. OWS aims to deliver up to 300 million doses of safe and effective vaccines for COVID-19 in early 2021 as part of a broader strategy to accelerate the development, manufacturing, and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics for the American people. BARDA is a key component of OWS along with various NIH institutes, the CDC, and DoD. The primary goal of OWS is to develop safe and effective medical countermeasures. As a USG effort, we will need to take financial risks to expedite the development of vaccines and therapeutics. The key to success is to invest in multiple candidates and support parallel development activities to meet the expedited timelines. The risk is purely financial, a financial risk of manufacturing large amounts of medical countermeasures while we're still determining the safety and efficacy. We will not risk the safety of these products. This financial risk is necessary to ensure MCMs are available for use as soon as the FDA has deemed them safe and effective. Our investments cost, and the impact to our economy is far greater. This committee and Congress at large have been very supportive of BARDA and our mission, and we are very thankful. Today, more than ever, we need your continued support and flexibility to ensure our staff can stay focused on the task at hand. I look forward to discussing how we can work together on this important issue. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Despro. We're going to do our best to stick with the 5 minutes that every member has. There'll certainly be a second round, and everybody's going to be dissatisfied at the end of their first 5 minutes with what they didn't get to ask, but the person that follows them will be particularly satisfied that they stayed close to the 5 minutes. Dr. Collins, Dr. Despro just said we would risk no safety. There'd be no product, even if produced, that would ever be available that wasn't safe. Do you have any concerns that on the vaccine side that FDA is not going through every safety step that they would normally go through?
Mr. Chairman, I have no concerns, and I'm deeply engaged in this whole process, working with Operation Warp Speed. I think the ability to do things so quickly is not compromising safety. It's taking advantage of other areas where we can speed things up, even though it may involve doing manufacturing at risk when we don't know yet whether that vaccine is going to work, and ultimately throw out a lot of what gets manufactured if it doesn't work. But there will be no compromise at all on the safety and the efficacy standards. That is absolutely clear.
Dr. Despro, let's follow up immediately. You mentioned the risk factor, and Dr. Collins just said we will throw out anything that's produced that doesn't go through the final certification of safety and efficacy. Tell us a little more about that process. So and I also noticed you said we were engaged in review, testing, and the approval phase. Are we engaged yet with anybody in the manufacturing phase?
We are fully engaged with multiple companies in the manufacturing phase. Under Operation Warp Speed, we're investing in a diverse array of technologies, different technologies, because we're uncertain of which vaccine technology may produce a safe and effective vaccine. We are doing, as Dr. Collins mentioned, manufacturing at risk. This is a risk that we have to take if we want to expedite the timeline. So there is a reason that the FDA is not part of Operation Warp Speed. They are an independent regulatory body, and they will review the safety and efficacy. But we will manufacture at risk large volumes of vaccine, and there is the potential that if those vaccines do not prove to be efficacious in phase 3 studies, that we would not move forward with that vaccine.
All right. Every time I hear at risk, and I'm pretty comfortable with vaccines, I think, oh, somebody's hearing at risk. I don't think we can emphasize enough that what we're risking is losing some money that we invested to move multiple products forward, so that when the products that did get through the whole process would be available at maybe roughly the same time they're finally approved for use. Nothing will be more frustrating in this moment than for FDA to certify a product and then hear it's going to be months before that vaccine would be available. And am I right in believing that that's what those months are what you're trying to avoid through BARDA?
That is correct. Again, under the entirety of Operation Warp Speed. But yes, BARDA is investing in multiple vaccine candidates, and you are exactly right. It is a financial risk. It is not a safety risk, and we are manufacturing, and the government is assuming that financial risk.
And I'm sure we're going to talk more about specific money later, but remember, we've already invested $3 trillion to try to fight the virus and save the economy. If somehow we lose $3 billion in an effort to get both of those fights in the right place quicker, I think we all ought to be willing to eagerly talk about the fact that, frankly, if we don't lose some money, we didn't try hard enough. If you choose 6 vaccines and they all make it, I think the question will be, well, why didn't you choose 8 vaccines? Because, again, Dr. Despro pointed out that all of these vaccines will be slightly different than the other vaccine. When you get a vaccine for COVID, and am I right in assuming that people will not all get the same vaccine in all likelihood for their COVID vaccine?
So there's the potential. Again, we're investing in multiple candidates. We hope to develop one or more safe and effective vaccines. If there are one or more safe and effective vaccines, there is the potential that one vaccine may work better in a certain population than the other vaccine. but we will continue to evaluate those through the safety and efficacy trials, phase 3 trials.
I mentioned before, we're currently involved in the distribution of a variety of vaccine programs throughout this nation. So this is really the prime responsibility of the CDC to work in coordination to take advantage of some of the logistical capabilities of the Department of Defense. But this is really CDC's prime responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Redfield. Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of our witnesses today. Dr. Redfield, this crisis, as we all know, will not end until we do have a safe and effective vaccine that can be widely and equitably distributed. On Tuesday, you agreed that we need a comprehensive national plan whose implementation will hinge on the ability of public health agencies to deploy a vaccine to every community once it is available. CDC's decades of experience managing a national immunization program have to be central to that planning. I think I just heard you answer Chairman Blunt, but under Operation Warp Speed, does CDC lead the planning for the immunization infrastructure and distribution, or is that in any way the Department of Defense responsibility?
Thank you very much for the question, Senator Murray. Again, it's leveraging, we're going to leverage the logistical capability of DOD with obviously the experience and central role that we play in distribution with our state, local, tribal, territorial, community partners around the nation. So again, as I said to the chairman, this is CDC's lead with the logistical support of the Department of Defense.
Has the DOD ever managed vaccine distribution at this kind of scale before?
I would have to refer that question to the Department of Defense, but I can just reiterate what I mentioned, that CDC has a system in place that we use routinely. And in
okay, well, I'm going to move on, but that's a question that's important here. Let me ask you, CDC hasn't used funding from any of the supplemental appropriations bills to prepare for a mass vaccine distribution campaign. Can you tell us why that is?
I'm sorry, Senator, I didn't quite understand the end of...
CDC has not used any of the funding of the supplemental appropriations bill that you've been given to prepare for a mass vaccine distribution campaign, and I want to know why that was.
Yeah, Senator, I'd have to have our group get back to you, but we've expended a substantial amount of the money that Congress has provided us. I know I've moved out over $12 billion already to state, local, territory, tribal health departments to begin to augment their public health capacity. So I would need to get our team to get to the specifics of it. We moved out the $140 million that you gave us to help us improve influenza vaccination.
Yeah, you've used that for flu vaccine, important, but the lack of preparation for COVID-19 vaccine distribution is concerning to me. And it doesn't sound to me like CDC is leading that effort. So, Mr. Chairman, I will move on, but I do need an answer. I think we all do to that question. Dr. Disbrow, last month, HHS announced a $628 million deal with Emergent Biosolutions to help manufacture the eventual COVID-19 vaccine. As the second largest award in the government's COVID-19 response, that deal cemented Emergent's dominance as the highest paid contractor for the HHS Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. A Washington Post investigation revealed that before the pandemic, ASPR paid Emergent more than double what it paid any other contractor. Dr. Cadleck, who oversees ASPR, consulted for Emergent as a strategic advisor for years and was once part owner of a biodefense company with Emergent's founder and chairman a connection, by the way, that he failed to disclose to the Senate during his confirmation process in 2017. So, Dr. Disbrow, this is my question to you today. Can you say with 100% confidence that companies are awarded BARDA contracts based solely on scientific merit and not their personal relationships?
Yes, I can.
Okay, well, it was reported yesterday that 3 companies making coronavirus drugs and vaccines removed standard language from their contracts with BARDA that give the government, quote, march-in rights to intervene in cases of unreasonable drug prices. I'm very concerned that pharmaceutical companies have dictated the terms of BARDA contracts and watered down the government's march-in right protections. At a time when we are spending billions of dollars in vaccine development, why did we weaken our ability to ensure fair vaccine?
The U.S. government can ask the holder of the IP to grant a non-exclusive, partial exclusive, or exclusive license to a responsible applicant, and if that does not move forward, then the U.S. government may grant that license. However, the contractor has to show that they are not, or expected to not, within reasonable time achieve practical application of invention. That is not occurring. We are all working very quickly to push forward with the development of vaccines and therapeutics. Action is necessary to alleviate health or safety needs not reasonably satisfied by the contractor. I also do not believe that threshold has been met. So again, under BARDA contracts, we work under the federal acquisition regulations. We do have some contracts which are called other transactional agreements, which are outside of the FAR, but we always, everything is based on science and to protect the federal government's investment.
Mr. Chairman, respecting time, I just want to say this. We are spending billions of dollars in vaccine development. We should not be weakening our ability to ensure fair vaccine pricing for the people of this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray.